Hello, are you here to debate? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, what's up? You here to debate?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. It kind of. Hold on. My phone's messed up. All right. Yes, I'm here to debate. Let's see. So my name, I was going to try and watch you at the same time, and then my phone cut out and etc. Hello?
Yep, still here.
All right. So let's see. So you say you want to teach LGBTQ topics in schools. I was just kind of wondering, I think I'm like your last caller there, where I'm not incredibly informed or knowledgeable, but I'm definitely ready to accept new ideas and whatnot. So my question for you is just generally, what would you be teaching in schools as far as LGBTQ topics go?
Yeah, sure. I'll let you know. Can I just first get your name, age, and pronouns?
Oh yeah, so my name is John. My age is 22. My pronouns are he, him.
All right, thank you, John. When we say teach LGBTQ topics in school, we're talking about a few things, right? The first would just be history stuff, right? So like there are very significant historical moments that happen. Wait, did you say 22 or 29?
Yeah,
Okay.
22.
I dissociated there for a second. There are very they're very relevant historical moments in history that took place with LGBTQ individuals, especially in our country, right? Like the Stonewall riots. Talking about Harvey Milk is like pretty important, right? These things are important to talk about. There's also the social aspect of it.
In conjunction with history, I would say.
Yeah, we would just teach that in history. And then there's the social aspect of it. Like I believe that we should probably teach kids, that like gay people exist. We should teach kids that there are families that have gay parents. We should teach children that trans people exist. You're going to meet trans people, because one of the things we know is that when you learn about a type of person, you're more tolerant towards that person. For instance, schools that have gay straight alliances on campus see a decrease typically in bullying of gay students. Right. So we would also teach them that. And as they get older, we would get into more like we would get into like when they're young, we teach them that it's okay to love whoever you love. But as they get older, gay students need to learn the same sex ed that straight students learn. They need to learn what is safe, how to have safe sex, how to protect themselves. They need to learn. We can even teach them a little bit, like, hey, this is what gender is. This is what sex is. This is all the we start young and we start simple, and then we just advance the topic as they get older.
Yeah, and I'm generally, I would say, all for having people be educated on all these things, because you're right. Like obviously, gay people need sex ed that's different in some ways. I'm not sure technically off the top of my head how, but I'm sure it's different in some ways than the information that you as a straight person would need to know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The thing where I'm kind of confused, I guess is the best way to put it, is because you have these gay topics that I've seen just from existing in the world, right? Like I met trans people and they're chill and they're cool, and I've met gays that are chill and they're cool and all that stuff. But when you talk about gender as an idea, that's something where personally I'm not even sure if I have the right idea about it, despite the fact that I've been living and talking in the world with an open mind. And so I find myself pretty frustrated by the fact that most people don't understand what gender is. I wouldn't say that I have a full idea of what gender is. And so I'm wondering okay, if we want to teach this in school and you have a good idea of what it is, please tell me what this idea is so I can decide if it's worth teaching in school,
Sure. Well, are you just asking me what is what is the definition of gender? Like how would we define gender as a concept?
Pretty much. I have a working model in my head that I don't know if that's exactly right. But it's just whenever I say it out loud, it sounds problematic. So let me just kind of explain to you what I mean. You have so you have all these fringe sort of lists of 40 to 50 genders that exist. And I'm okay, we definitely don't need to teach this in school as a list of 41 genders that could potentially exist. I don't think that that's the way to go. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, so all I would say is if we're defining gender is just a list of behaviors or In fact, let me just read off the WHO, because I actually think their definition of gender is really good. Gender refers
Okay,
to the
cool, yeah.
characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. I think this as a definition of gender is really good and concrete, and we don't need
I think it's good too.
yeah, we like, depending on the age of the child, we don't need to teach them more than that, right? Like, as they get older, we
Yeah,
can begin to
yeah.
teach them, like, oh, hey, when it comes to gender, uh what's the word I'm looking for? Something you need to know is that some people might not identify with the gender that society dictates they are, right?
Right, that's fine. And like, what I'm really sort of concerned about is not so much like, oh, we're gonna put these terrible ideas into kids. It's more like I want like I think both of us want everyone to walk around with a pretty good idea of how to talk about gender and genders and gender identities and all these things. And like what I'm concerned with is let's, I guess I'm thinking as a foregone conclusion we're going to talk about LGBTQ topics in some capacity. I'm just kind of being like, okay, if we're going to talk about gender, we want everyone to have a working theory of what gender is. How are we going to do that? How can we best talk about it? And how can we actually get this sort of nebulous idea into everyone's minds and they can walk forward with it? Because let me just talk about like where I've had some like friction with other people talking about this is that like we talk about the WHO definition. That's, if it's not exactly the definition that I would have came up with, it's like super damn close, right? So you talked about like a set of norms that exist around genders and all those things. I guess an important discrepancy that I'd really like to hear your opinion on is non-binary a gender? Because it's obviously a gender identity, but I wouldn't call it a gender because non-binary just refers to people that aren't either male or female, but non-binary even of itself, I wouldn't call it gender. Like, how would you teach that sort of idea to a 15-year-old?
So there's two ways that I would, if you are non-binary, you do not align with any, right? You wouldn't align with any of the gender categories. Well, yeah, because you're non-binary. So you don't, typically we're going to be looking at
two genders that we are familiar with.
Yeah, well, typically you're going to be looking at the two genders that are common in like our Western society. But if you're non-binary, you are not going to align with either of those. So some non-binary people will call themselves agender. But like typically when you're non-binary, it's you do not align with those two genders. So I think if you have somebody who's non-binary who says like, I don't have a gender, that's fine. But I think people are going to take it differently. There are going to be non-binary people who say like me being non-binary is a gender of itself. But non-binary is a list of like a bunch of different. There's a bunch of different things inside of non-binary. So it's tough to say like is non-binary a gender in and of itself because there's somebody in chat said it's an umbrella term that refers to a lot of different things.
Exactly, that's what I would have said. Is that it's an umbrella term. It refers to maybe a bunch of people that, this is so hard to talk about, man. But it refers to a bunch of people that may have, right, so like imagine in the far future, like 400 years from now, you have men, you have women, and gender is a social construct. So we've created, maybe two other genders or something like that, right? Like if the word non-binary exists, it includes those two genders because non-binary just means you're neither male or you're neither a man or a woman, right? So you can have either of those two potential genders that could exist in the future and still be non-binary, and you can also not have a gender and also be non-binary, right? This is just an umbrella term that says you're not a man and you're not a woman. That in and of itself, I wouldn't call it gender. I'd call it a gender identity because it describes your relationship with gender, but in and of itself isn't a gender. And like, I'm not even necessarily sure that I'm right about this. I feel like I'm right about this, but my main point is like, we need to figure this out and we need to be like good at talking about it. Like, it seems like if you're like course, your education is just full of a whole bunch of, some people will say this and other people will say this. That's not like an education really, in my opinion, kind of like, I struggle to call that like a course. It just sounds like a bunch of, ideas that are just floating around, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't really have an issue. I don't really have an issue with that, right? I don't have an
You
issue with
don't?
non-binary not being considered a gender. Like it's, I would say it's definitely a gender identity, but I have no problem with saying
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's not a gender category in and of itself. The
Yes.
things under the umbrella
Right.
would be the gender categories. But there are going to
See,
be
this
people who
is
just broadly refer to them as themselves as non-binary, and that, like, you have to think about it in two different ways. Basically, if someone's referring to
okay.
themselves as non-binary because they fit one of those other, like a gender person, right? Non-binary would be the umbrella term for a gender, but there are people who are like, just simply I'm non-binary. That in of itself would be some type of them categorizing their gender. It just wouldn't fit into the modern Western two gender concept that we have. But like, it
Right.
being an umbrella term is I don't think anybody minds that.
Yeah. See, like and this is like, I really feel like we're at the heart of like a lot of miscommunication between like, you know, queer discourse and the discourse that like that I'm native to, which is, you know, like Protestant, straight, white, Christian, all that stuff. And like, the thing is, so non-binary is a gender category. Trans is not a gender. It describes your relationship with gender. It's like a gender identity, sort of.
Yeah,
This is
trans.
also
Well,
like that,
because
right? Like, I'm saying,
transgender is just talking about the misalignment between your gender identity and your sex, and non-binary, transgender, and gender incongruence are very similar in their meaning. And non-binary can fit under both of those categories as well, because a non-binary person would have a gender that differs from the sex they were assigned at birth.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I wasn't thinking of non-binary people as trans, but my point of bringing those terms up is saying that none of them are genders. All of them just describe your gender identity or your relationship with gender, but them as categories are not.
All of these things describe your gender identity's relation to your sex.
Yes. Now, the thing is, though, I feel like where the problems are is that if with thinking about this sort of line of thinking, and with the line of thinking that genders are socially constructed, right? The whole society is aware of the gender, okay? I, in my society, am only aware of two genders. So that really fucking makes it seem like there's only two genders. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and like that's obviously like a
don't think that's
sort of thing to say.
I don't think that's a bad. I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, right, like we were raised in a cis-normative society, right? So our brains are going to default to cis-normative thinking, like almost every time. It's just about
now I don't have cis-normative thinking, and I still think there's only two genders, because I would say that non-binary in and of itself isn't a gender.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. If somebody were to say to me, Jovan, how many genders are there? I would say, well, in our society, there's typically two, right? In our, like, because that is the case. And those two genders have shaped. But if you were to say to me, Jovan, how many genders are there? And I'm hanging out with a bunch of my indigenous friends, I'd say, well, in my society, it's typically two. In theirs, they may have more. Like if I'm hanging out with Samoans, like people, like Polynesian people, they have 5 gender categories.
Yeah,
I don't remember exactly how many are Polynesian are in the Polynesian society, but like it's going to be different. So yeah, I have no problem saying like typically there are two, but there is going to be the atypical. There are going to be people who don't identify as that two in our society.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of mostly where I wanted to get to this. I'm about to sort of hop off, but yeah, no, we're in complete agreement. I think the thing that I guess the last thing I want to say is that like if more people that, because you know, again, like I'm like Trump is marketing himself to me specifically, like not you, me. You know what I mean? Because I'm white and I'm straight and I was raised Christian and all those things. If more people that Trump is not trying to market himself to said things like there are only two genders, even if you have that caveat there that it's in your society, I just think that we'd be a lot better at communicating with each other, you know?
Well, I mean, I think the opposite. I'm going to think it's the obstinate person who hears there's more than two genders and like they abstainly go, well, no, there can't be. Like that's the person that I think is the person who's not like opening their
Yeah.
not like allowing themselves to hear change. They're just like sticking to their
Oh
narrow
yeah,
worldview.
no, I'd say that's definitely true. And like I kind of think of those people as a lost cause. I mean, I don't know. Like I'm definitely holding you to a higher standard than I am like people, you know, that are Trump supporters and that are closed-minded, but it's because I just respect you more, you know? Like that's really what's going on there. And like, yeah, like and you know, like I've said there are only two genders a few times right now, but I basically never say that around, you know, a large group of, not a large group of gay people, that sounds weird, but you know, more progressive circles, I wouldn't say that around, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's sort of the flipping it around. Like, yeah, I guess, like I am saying the thing that sounds good to the other side in air quotes, because we're on the same side as far as we all love trans people. It's just that like culturally we're different, you know? And so like I'm crossing the other side all the time by saying there's more than two genders. That's happened pretty frequently. And but like on the real, like both of us, me and you, are both kind of just aware that like, yeah, there are like two genders and thinking about this. I don't know, man. I appreciate you saying that though.
Just to reiterate, it's not that there's two genders. It's just that there's our society
There's two genders in this society. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
in our society,
I would just say, I would say two genders is what's typically recognized in our society, but like that doesn't mean there necessarily has to be. There can be.
Yeah, I mean, like I would, yeah, and like, because the difference is like they're social constructs. So yes, they aren't eternal and they aren't inherent and they aren't objective, but at the same time, you can't just construct a gender overnight. You know what I mean? Like you can't construct a gender overnight the same way you can invent calculus overnight. I don't know if that made any sense, but
no, I get you.
That's kind of where that's why I feel more comfortable saying there are only two genders, because for the foreseeable future and in my country, which is, you know, several million square miles, there are only two genders. And so it's kind of like that. Yeah, well, technically there could be others, but like if we're being like limited in our scope to these 50 years in this country, you know, then there are only two genders.
I think it's just easiest. I guess for me, it's just easiest to say like our country was not founded, but our country has existed under a two gender norm for hundreds of years, but that two gender norm doesn't need to be permanent.
Yeah, definitely. But it is in fact currently the norm. You know what I mean? Like, and we're both just restating the same thing because we agree with each other. You know. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I guess I'll hop off with this final thought of, you know, I feel like more lefties should say there are more than two. Should they say there are two genders and then explain themselves, and then more righties will probably cross the aisle. Because obviously, like me and you being lefties, like aren't gonna cross the aisle. Like we aren't gonna hate trans people. But I think changes communication might get a few people to our side. Anyway, anything else to say? I've enjoyed talking to you.
Nope, that was all.
All right. See you, bud. Have a good day.
All right. Have a good one. Oh, shit. Orlando. What's up, everybody? Thanks for watching this video. And I want to give a special shout out to my YouTube members. Their names are on the side. Membership starts at $2.99 a month, and you get early access to videos, exclusive members-only videos, and access to the Red Mirror Media Discord server. Thank you again to my members, and thanks for watching.